All right, ladies and gentlemen, a huge welcome back to you all to your professional diploma in digital marketing and SEO. I'm really excited for today's lesson as we're going to take everything we've learned over the course of the module and we'll learn how to create our own digital marketing strategy. So what exactly will we learn today? Well, first of all, I want to take this occasion to actually help you understand retargeting properly. Okay, that's something we briefly touched on when talking about remarketing in the previous lesson. And yes, there is something that's going to be a slight difference between what we spoke about in the previous lesson versus now, but I'm going to help you understand exactly what that is when we get there. Then throughout the lesson, you will discover the various elements that are part of the digital marketing strategy. All right, we're going to break down those elements and obviously peel those layers back so that we have confidence in our understanding, and then we'll develop a content plan. And at the end of this module, I'll show you exactly how we can go ahead and create our own digital marketing strategy with the information and knowledge that we have. So let's properly kick off this lesson and talk about retargeting. So first of all, what is retargeting, ladies and gents? Think about it. We spoke about it time and time again, and I just need you to kind of just jump to the conclusion now based on the information that we've already spoken about. Well, essentially, remarketing ability actually depends on the platform to kick off with. So according to the Gartner's Digital Marketing Glossary, retargeting is the use of a website tracker to target visitors elsewhere. For example, with display ads or email marketing, and then lure them back to complete the conversion. All right, so turning them from a prospective into a closed deal. And then these trackers is what we already spoke about. The cookies, right? We spoke about cookies a couple of lessons ago, but simply put, your online activity is always being tracked, okay? So that is, if you look for a product or visit a website, you will see these ads or products again and again on other websites that you visit, or you might receive an email that you didn't complete a purchase. That is retargeting. Any additional contact with users who have interacted with your business before all falls into the same category of understanding. Some marketers make a differentiation between retargeting and remarketing. Right now, you need to understand the difference between the two. It's very important. With retargeting, referring specifically to display ads, and remarketing to emails only. Though Google does call it retargeting options on Google Ads, remarketing, it all gets a little bit confusing at times, but don't worry too much about the names. Digital marketers have a talent for coming up with 10 names for the same thing, so don't stress about it too much. The most important thing for you to remember right now, though, is that the option exists in email and in ad display format. So what are some of the benefits of retargeting? Well, first of all, you know that retargeting targets users who are already interested in what you have to offer, as they have already interacted with your business before. This means that a conversion is likelier to happen as your content is shown to someone who you know is already interested and has heard of you before, which means that there's much higher chance of leading them down the sales funnel. And then, of course, you can reinforce your brand image and remind them of who you are and what you do. Very likely, users will not immediately buy off of you just because they've seen one ad, but you will need to reinforce a message several times, and retargeting always helps achieve that. Then, also a great way to remarket your product or service across several devices and multiple channels is to say someone visits your website on the phone, for example, and while later they see your ad again on their computer browser on a different platform. That's a great way to really get more coverage and reposition yourself where your users are. So the great diversity that you can actually apply with regards to your marketing efforts needs to be embarked on with regards to remarketing. You need cross-device activity. It absolutely is necessary if you're going to find some sort of success in your targeting and remarketing efforts. And then retargeting is a cost-effective method, as you're not, wasting a budget on a broad audience who might have never heard of you before, but rather you are actually targeting people who are at least in the awareness and more than likely in the interest phase along your funnel structure. So keep that in mind, but obviously just keep track of where the bulk of your clients are throughout this entire process. So as you know, one of the reasons that you are using remarketing is the message that is being reinforced several times. Now in marketing, there is a concept called the rule of 7. It's quite an old rule, so you might have heard about it before, but it basically means that the customers have to see your ad 7 times before they actually make a purchase. So nowadays, there's much more advertisements and placements everywhere you go. Users get bombarded by marketing messages, so the amount is probably higher. But the number itself is not necessarily the most important thing. But the point is that users get to see your message many times before making the purchase, and that's something that we actually need to achieve. Now, as with anything, it would suggest monitoring your performance. We don't just want users to suffer from ad fatigue, right, and get too used to seeing our ad and actually not looking into it properly, which is where they will obviously see your ad so many times. The ad loses the effect, right? We don't want that fatigue to kick in. And retargeting helps in spreading the same message, but in different formats, on different platforms, essentially, so it doesn't get too bland. One thing to keep in mind though is that when it comes down to retargeting, it's all depending on the different platforms. You will have different options to retarget, but no matter the platform, you will need to set up your tracking first. Otherwise, you won't actually be able to get any data that you could utilize. And if you don't know, or if Google or any other platforms don't know who the users of the website are, then it's impossible for you to actually get your ads displayed to them, because then your remarketing or retargeting efforts actually don't have any sort of meaning or base to them. So if you haven't already done so, make sure that you set up your tracking, or at least Google Analytics. Speak to your developer if it's not something that you feel comfortable with doing yourself, and I'm sure they would be able to do it in an absolute heartbeat. But we'll be looking at setting up Facebook tracking pixel as well in coming modules. So stay tuned for that, and it's something that you can really get excited for because it's an absolute game changer. And by then, you'll be able to apply the process to many other platforms as well. Now, when it comes to retargeting, you would ideally want to split your audience up into different lists or segments, as people who interact with your brand in different ways, right? But there's many different people out there that you're trying to target, and different ways that they actually interact with your brand. So you want to be able to split them up into different segments. It's only going to be easier for you to manage them like that. You could target people who viewed a more specific page once. For example, people who have visited checkout pages but haven't actually completed their purchase. We could also target people who are based on so many different pages they visited, for example. So more than a certain amount of pages, that would be a signal that they could be interested in the brand and might potentially be interested in making a purchase. You could create a time-based list and exclude them from one another. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you have converters over the last 7 days and also over the last 30 days. Exclude the 7-day from the 30-day list, because people who converted less 7 days away are probably less likely to convert again. Then let's say, or post engages, okay? You could exclude your page followers from the list and then encourage whoever else is engaged to join your page or even just sign up. So just to make you aware, or to confirm that you don't have to like a page in order to see its content. You could have a friend who follows it as well. It could be something that was quite viral over a certain period of time, which was quite popular amongst your friends, or friends' friends, or their friends' friends. The list could go on. So yes, you don't actually have to like a page to see its contents. And then you could have a list of site visitors over the last 30 days, and include engages over social engages over the last 30 days, and then target them with more aggressive sell than the others. Now, you could also take your converters over the last 90 days and exclude them from the 30-day converters, and then sell some products to people who converted between 31 and 90 days. Again, it all really just depends on your actual business. This might not work for you if you sell cars, for example. If you sell a car to someone, it's very unlikely that they're going to buy a car from you again anytime soon. Now that we're aware of retargeting, let's get started and actually work on our digital strategy itself. So first of all, what is a digital strategy? Well, essentially, according to Wikipedia, the digital strategy is a form of a strategic management and business answer to a response or a digital question, often best addressed as a part of an overall business strategy. The scope of a digital strategy can vary hugely, but what we're focusing on in this lesson is more of a marketer and consumer-based effort, such as websites, mobile e-commerce, social sites, search engine optimization, and advertising. And then a digital marketing plan is a document containing the details for all the planning for your digital marketing campaigns or actions. It details, amongst other things, your short, medium, and long-term business goals, the strategies to achieve the goals at the digital level, the channels to use, the action and development plans, so essentially what you need in order to achieve your goals and how you're going to action them, investment and budget, and then the timing and roadmap. So timing is by when, and then roadmap is where does your particular goal or goals fit into the bigger picture. There are multiple things that can be considered in a digital strategy, and we'll go into a few of them in just a bit. But don't feel like you need to include all of these steps. It all just depends on the stage of where your business actually is and what your objectives actually are. So the first thing that you're going to need is to determine your short, medium, and long-term goals. They'll often differ based on the stage of the company, but obviously at this point in time, it's very important that we don't just think about the stage of our company, but we think about just learning what we would need to do when our business gets to these different mechanics and these different stages of development, because we need to be prepared accordingly. Just as a reminder, make sure to follow the SMART goal, the SMART goal setting when you think about your goals. Your goals should always be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and obviously timely. If you need a reminder on that, please do have a look at lesson 2 again, because that's where we covered this exact concept and we broke it down layer by layer. Remember our case study on custom comfort? Well, let's have another look at them and come up with another proper short, medium, and long-term goals for them that we could actually use as an explanation in this entire process. So a short-term goal would be to increase the number of leads by 10% at a target CPL of $30 by the end of the quarter. So we would be willing to spend $30 essentially in advertising costs to get a lead. Then our minimum term goal would be to increase the sales by 20% by the end of the year. And then a long-term custom comfort goal would be to increase the perception of being a quality brand by 20% in the next 5 years. Now, this is all relatively structured and very smart, and this is how you should be structuring your goals internally for your business too. Now, just as a reminder, we would obviously set these goals based on our own data, and that's after evaluating what kinds of growth we have been achieving and obviously what's realistic for us. These ones here that are just randomly put together are merely just an example, but what you need to achieve needs to be specific to your overall achievements up until this point. Anyway, now that we know what we want to achieve, we would generally summarize everything on one strategy sheet. And this is a perfect type of template that you should create. So make sure that you print this out and you maybe just create something that's more suitable for you, and you could definitely use the same structure. So we'd fill this in more and more detail as you go, and obviously you would try include as much information as you possibly can. As I said, we'll go through this example now just so that you can get an idea of how you could keep this information from this document or on this document. You'd be able to split out what you need into a different format. So for example, you could create something like this, like almost a master document that houses everything that you actually need. And then from there, you could go and create your own content plans and your schedules, etc. This isn't the only way to keep track of information, by the way. You can also track it however you like. So just make sure that you have it displayed in a way that makes sense and is more suitable for you and your business. So you can also just see here that I've included a business name at the top, being Custom Comfort, our friendly sofa giants that we've been speaking about. Then we have the target market. I'm going to go through that in just a bit. And then we obviously have the goals, the objectives, the campaign dates, what we have just gone through essentially. And then I've started populating the different channels, as you can see. And this will form a part of the schedule, which I'll take you through a little bit later on in this lesson. You may or may not have established the marketing funnel that you are most comfortable with just yet, but if not, then now would be a great time to actually decide on putting that together. Just to recap on what a marketing funnel is, we covered this in lesson 3. It's a collection of different stages, and ideally what you want potential customers to actually move quite freely through. You want to take each of your goals and apply them to your funnel. We'll go through some examples in just a second, but for the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to choose 2 different funnels just to make the differences a bit clearer again. So the first one was AIDA, which I've already chosen for the long-term goal. And remember, AIDA stands for awareness, interest, desire, and action. So you would take each goal. For example, the first one here is to increase the awareness that Custom Comfort is a high quality brand. And then you would detail what people would be doing or would be thinking about doing in each stage of this funnel. So under awareness, they would be seeing posts on social media. Remember, for example, in this stage, going back to the goal, under interest, they would visit the website and social media pages, right? That's where the interest is actually generated. That would be the action that implies they are actually interested in the first place. And under desire, they could be reading customer reviews as well as articles. So in digital terms, this would be tracking blog posts or time on the actual site itself. We'll go into these a little bit more as we progress. But just to give you an idea now and then, of course, the action would be to subscribe to the blog post or the newsletter that circulates month to month or week to week, however often it actually gets out there. We'd go so far as to say recommendations as well. I would certainly include that. I know it's quite an abstract goal, but I wanted to show you that it's actually possible to set up a sales funnel for it. Let's apply the same principle for our leads, something a bit more tangible. Again, users might start out by seeing posts on social media and general ads. Once they get interested, then they visit the website. And then they might actually start browsing the products that they actually desire at this stage. And then under action would be to submit a lead and get a quote for a professional sofa. Now that's really where we want our customers to get to, but it all needs to be measured through this funnel. Again, all of these steps are aimed at the overall goal, and we should try and move them from one stage to the next stage of the funnel as seamlessly as possible, but we can only do that if we actually seasoned vets in understanding these funnels. Now for our last goal, the increased sales, I've chosen a performance-based marketing funnel, the VAC model, which is the view, act, and convert. Here we are only interested in people who are currently wanting our product. We don't want to take them through the different stages of awareness and all of that. And yes, there are pros and cons if you could argue against and for, but I'm just giving you a simple example here so that you can understand the overall concept. Many companies do choose to take this kind of method in terms of their targeting or paid media targeting. So it's certainly worth our while actually learning about it in detail. So in the view stage of this funnel, someone would be looking for a product or service that they would be seeing an ad for. The act phase would be visiting the website or browsing and having a look around. And then the conversion of it would be to obviously focus on completing the purchase. See, it's a very simple process that actually cuts out quite a bit. It's more straight to the point, and it's more in the face of the potential customer. The interest starts from them seeing the ad and immediately going to the website and browsing around and obviously potentially converting from there on to make the purchase. It's a lot more direct and a lot more seamless. However, again, this all really relates to the type of business that you're running that would decide on which funnel would be best for you. So you've broken down your goals into different stages of the marketing funnel that you've chosen. And now you need to look at your buyer personas. All right, this is where we start unpacking the buyer or the type of buyer that we'd like to target. And this is something that we looked at in lesson 3 more specifically. And just to recap, a buyer persona is a fictitious character that represents the type of target customer based on the comprehensive audience research that you and your company have completed. So obviously, if you're just starting out where you're relatively new, you won't necessarily be able to have this comprehensive audience research completed just yet. You won't have that amount of data to complete it. However, you might not have the budget in order to go to a huge survey or hold a focus group of some sort either. But you can still obviously create the different personas based on who you believe would be the ideal person in that market. They're kind of ideal based on an imagination that we could create right away. As I said, imagination is a big part of marketing. As we get more data in, we can be a bit more specific. But a marketer's key skills is being able to get creative and just start imagining and forecasting a couple of steps ahead. And in this case, as a new business, it might be something that you have to do. So we have done this already for Custom Comfort. Of course, we don't have data, and Custom Comfort is a new business too. So they might not have too much either. But they do see a little bit of it coming in already. Remember our example of Elegant Elizabeth, or was it Elegant Emma? I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. Let's say she lives in the city, likes having a classy environment around her, and is obviously married and has a demanding but well-paying job that she's happy with. let's add another buyer persona to the mix, as we would typically not have one person specifically to focus on, but I would suggest at least 3 to kick off. Let's say we have a 27-year-old male who has finished college already and has been working for the past couple of years and is slowly progressing into management level, and this person is quite happy about their progression and quite content with the type of job that they have. He likes socializing with friends and inviting them over for drinks, and is known to be quite stylish too. Whether you do or don't have the capacity or capability or need to create buyer personas, you should at least have your target market statement. Again, something we covered in previous lessons is the reason as to why market segments or statements are so vitally important, because it gives your company's efforts some sort of validation and reference, right? It actually drives the initiative of why you create ad campaigns in the first place. You see, I'm trying to just tie it all together here for you. So your target market statement would look something like this. Your target market is gender and age ranged, who live in a place or a type of place, who also do some sort of activity. That's what I really like to tie it all into, or how I like to tie it all in together. It sounds very odd, but let's look at this example for our case study. My target market is male and female professionals aged between 25 to 55 years old, who live in the city and like to stay up to date with different trends. See, that's quite a specific market statement, and each market statement really helps define the nature of your business and obviously the efforts that you apply to your ad campaigns. Then once you have thought about your objectives, and obviously what you need to do is list your existing digital touchpoints and how effective they actually are. Always think about your existing touchpoints and obviously how you can change them, work on them, or integrate them. Note that the customer journey comes in here. So once you have your touch points, and we'll go through them just now, make sure to map them out and really just think about the journey consumers will take to reach the goal. So let's keep going with our case study here, just because, we've got some good momentum and everything's starting to make a little bit more sense with Custom Comfort. When listing your touch points, think about all the different ways that consumers will interact with your business. And in this case, I'm referring to digital only, as this course is about digital marketing. So Custom Comfort has a website, and they are present on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And they appear on Google search, and they send regular emails. So they're pretty active in their engagement. Now, when you list your touch points, we don't only want to see the ones which we have, we also want to evaluate the performance, right? Just seeing them is not going to do us any good. We actually want to evaluate those touch points' performance. How many visitors or followers do you actually have? And what's the engagement actually like? Depending on your goals, you would add these different types of metrics to your documents and then obviously track the progression. So beware of your touch point. Have a think about how you're using them and if they're actually helping you work towards achieving your goals. What is the purpose of those touch points? And then monitor the progress and obviously map out the different customer journeys that align with them. So moving on to budgeting, and this doesn't necessarily have to follow immediately after looking at your touch points and the state of them, but I find that it often does help to look at what budgets you have available before looking into advertising on specific channels, because you might have 10 channels in mind, but actually you might only have the budget for 3. So that's why I've put it here. But budgeting shouldn't be set as is. When you set a budget, you should remain flexible based on your performance. However, there are a few ways that you can actually determine your budget. There are revenue-based industry standards, which I'll take you through certainly. And obviously, there's a volume or targeted-based budget, which gets a little bit more specific. But first up, young businesses and those businesses less than 5 years old more specifically, it makes more sense that a younger business needs to spend more aggressively as they rely much more on the branding and reputation. All right, they need to grow that. It doesn't already exist. They need to build that up and be a bit aggressive in how they approach it. Experts suggest that between 12 and 20% of gross revenue should be going towards marketing. Whether that's all going to digital marketing is another story, but that's the overall recommendation. So let's say that the gross revenue for the year was $100,000. Of this should be invested into marketing. And again, whether that's to digital is really up to you. Older business should have hopefully established themselves and their awareness and become more profitable than what a newer business would over a certain period of time. So their efforts would need to be a little bit less aggressive. However, budgets can therefore decrease between 6 to 12% of gross revenue. Now, neither of these really cover if you're just starting out, and therefore if you haven't made any profit. So obviously it's much difficult to determine a budget, but whatever resources you have, you should allocate a large portion of it to marketing. The exact percentage, though, depends on the capital that you have and what other responsibilities or goals that you need to achieve too. Remember, though, that nothing can improve if you don't have the people who are actually aware of your brand and visiting your site. That's very important to get right. Then we have volume and target-based budgeting. Let's have a look at our examples. Well, first of all, we have lead generation. Let's just say that a 10% decrease or increase rather in leads means that we want 200 additional leads. So if we have $200 leads at a target cost of $30 US, that means we have a budget of around $6,000. Now, if we split that over 3 months, we need a budget of around $2,000 a month. We split evenly for now, but depending on the tactics of the performance, this might change. For example, if we retarget aggressively to non-converters in the second month, we might require more spend in that 1 month versus the other month. Now, let's say we have a budget of around $40,000 US over the year to reach our sales goals, which is around 20% increase to the previous. So let's say that's about an increase of $400,000 in sales for the year, which is around $33,333 per month. With a budget of around $40,000 over the year, we would have a monthly budget of around $3,333 USD. Now, in this case, let's say we have an average order value of around $600, which is something that you would calculate by adding all your orders and then obviously dividing it by the amount of orders that you actually have. If then we divide our monthly revenue by what we want to achieve of $33,333 by $600, we'd get about 56 orders a month. Okay, that's what it comes down to. And then obviously, if we divide our monthly budget of $3,333 US by the amount of orders, we then get cost per acquisition of $5.55. All right, and that's what we would spend for a purchase, and that's how we can really calculate these figures right down to the nitty-gritty. Now, don't worry too much about the figures. I know it can get quite confusing, but this is something that we need to focus on and obviously help guide us towards achieving our goals. It's very important to understand the numbers as we progress and mature into marketing, but right now we're just peeling back the layers, and where we are right now is just understanding how this all integrates together and why these numbers are actually so important. Your targets won't be achieved through paid media alone. So we'd need to get quite creative with our organic options, and even then it might not be possible to achieve them. That's why it's called target at the end of the day, because it's something you obviously strive towards and do what you can in order to achieve it. But it's sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you're just under, and that's okay. But obviously if we stay persistent and we have a driving force being this target, we have something to push ourselves and obviously measure ourselves by. Sometimes you're just over. There are many different factors that we can take into consideration. Just to close off on the budgeting side, I can't tell you what you need to spend on achieving success without going through quite a lengthy process and understanding those circumstances involved. You probably know what you can afford to spend right off the bat, and it likely isn't what you would like to be spending. But take that amount and prioritize. Even if it means that you can only afford to spend on one channel while relying on the organic for the bulk of your initial growth, that's not a bad thing at all. It's definitely a start. It doesn't mean that you failed and that you're not going to succeed. It just means that your situation is different and you need to be a bit more creative with the resources that you have. There's no concern about that as long as you don't spend yourself too thin and you don't try to achieve everything at once, then you will move at a realistic pace. So it's time to determine your channels, your budget split, and obviously your content. And this is where strategy really comes into the fore as you determine the best targeting and content for your chosen channels. Your budget splits are a good guideline. However, they must be flexible and based on performance. Also include your own channels, so your website, your newsletter, your CRM, and other organic channels for selection. Note that I place a lot of focus on paid media due to the focus of this course, but your organic and more traditional channels should be a part of your strategy regardless. We'll be covering the budget split in just a minute, but I want to show you how to properly select the channels and demonstrate why we select the channels that we actually do. Now, as you know, we could select the channels and types of content based on buyer personas. We need to be where they are. We know who our customers are, and our target market spends their time on Facebook and Instagram. And seeing as a lot of people are into home improvement, spend their time on Pinterest more importantly, and more specifically in this case, we want to present there as well. Now, of course, we need to work on SEO and Google. I think the stats on Google I've shown you should really demonstrate as to why it's so necessary to be present on those platforms. But obviously, again, I totally understand that each business is different. And then the type of content we would produce, again, based on our buyer personas, we would want to solve their problems and demonstrate we can actually do that through search engine marketing, social media marketing, and of course, organic content. Especially for branding purposes, organic content is absolutely vital. It really is. And in this case, we want to establish ourselves as a high quality brand. So we need high quality content. It just all integrates to one another, needs to work parallel. We need to be visual, educate users, build relationships, and you will see the proper split of how the budget is distributed in just a minute. So as we determined, we have a budget of around $6,000 for our short-term goal, $40,000 for our medium-term goal, and then for our long-term goal, we don't really have a set budget because that's something that would be used or included in all campaigns, meaning that we should really incorporate this goal into all of our communications, especially since it's not really a fully tangible goal. It's about building a brand, and that is done through our communications, the way we position ourselves essentially. And again, this is a big subject that we need to spend quite a bit of time on, which we'll certainly do as soon as we get to module 4. So let's actually see how we would use this budget to distribute it across all of our channels and see what kind of content that we'd be producing. So this might look a little bit overwhelming, and I'm sorry if it does, but it's really not once you start unpacking it. But this is an example of where you could start populating your strategy. As I've done here with Custom Comfort, this is just for the short-term goal of around 200 leads in the next 3 months. Now, when it comes to the ad copy, I've kept it simple, but if we really stick to our AIDA funnel and go from awareness to interest to desire and then obviously to action, you would come up with a different ad copy for each of the stages. So you see, in terms of the rows here, I've got a channel. Obviously, that's where that is highlighted in the red rectangle. And then there's obviously targeting the objective that each of these channels will obviously meet. The key performance indicator of this, the dates of the campaign, the budget or the budgeting split. And this is obviously, again, completely optional. You know, this is all really up to you and what you want to measure as a metric. The creative link, so that's the link to the image that you're going to be using for your ad, and your ad copy and the status of it all. I've started with organic, and we have at the top there SEO, and the targeting would be keyword based, and those keywords would be kept in a separate document. Then the objective is traffic to site. The KPI would be the actual traffic on a site, so that's what I would tell you if you've what would tell you if you've actually achieved your goal of traffic or not. And in terms of how it fits into the short-term goal of leads, you would obviously include your site visitors too, which I'm going to go over in just a bit as soon as we start focusing on retargeting strategy and the details of it. So obviously this is just another way of increasing the volume of people who are visiting your site, widening the pool of people that you can actually have and advertise to in your remarketing list. It's a very important metric and strategy to include if remarketing is going to be an approach for you. Then, using the touch points that we listed before, we're going to be using the Facebook page. And because it's an organic post, the only targeting that we have available is page followers. The objective is that we meet the short-term objectives of leads more specifically. We have the dates, the budget, the creative link, and the ad copy, as well as the status. Now, here, what I've done in this example is first a Facebook line that is just running from the 1st to the 7th of Jan. So that ad will run for about a week. And obviously then it will be replaced by the second line from the 8th to the 14th of June. And then targeting the page followers as it is an organic channel. Again, the same with Instagram and Pinterest because it's organic. We're just targeting followers, trying to achieve the same objective of leads at the end of the day. Then moving down to paid SMM, which is social media marketing, we first have Facebook, and then targeting initially in males and females between 25 to 45, we're going to be targeting based on education. So we want university level targeting, and obviously we'll target for those management positions or higher. These are actual targeting capabilities within Facebook. So it's not just something that you are aspiring to target. It's actually a metric that we can include. That is your target. You are meeting the short-term objective target in this case. The KPIs will be leads, CPL, and your conversion rate. Those are the top 3 metrics that you're going to be wanting to look at. The campaign is running from the 1st of January to the 1st of March. Now I've added in copy here, but I would only be running one ad throughout the 3-month period. Because if you remember, we spoke about the fatigue aspect that would definitely happen if people were seeing the same ad for that amount of time. I mean, it could get overwhelming for them. But let's just say that would be the first ad, and then based on the performance of that, you would be uploading another with a slight change, etc. Then in the next line, you would start targeting our site visitors. So here we have a standard list of all site visitors excluding converters. We're assuming that they're interested because they visited the site, because that's still a broad targeted remarketing list. We're going to target them with quite a generic ad though, because of the fact that it's a remarketing strategy. But then moving down, we have Facebook and targeting all viewers of the Get a Quote page. So in order to be able to target this, we need to have a Facebook pixel in place, and obviously have our tracking working as well. Then KPIs won't really differ from the previous 2 as well as the dates, but now because of the fact that we actually viewed the free trial page, they didn't obviously convert. Right, we wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, for lack of a better word, in our specific copy. So here on the right is just another example, dreaming about just getting it done, walking from home and just relaxing. Obviously make your wish come true and design your own sofa. Contact us today and get a quote. Not the only ad that you'll have running, but it's certainly a really great start, and we explained why that was when we got into how the nature of these ads is really structured. And then finally for our Facebook ad, at least in this example, we've got all the post engages, which would be an audience from Facebook, not from analytics or your website. Again, the assumption here is that anyone who's already engaging with your post is already interested in what you're offering, or at least in the topic, around interior design. And they shouldn't be ignored. They really shouldn't. They might not necessarily be website visitors, for example, but we need to obviously try and move them from the engagement phase to actually showing a bit more interest, interacting with the site more and more, etc. And then the same with Instagram too. Now in terms of the budget split, there is no real science to it. It can get quite tricky to try and decide or determine what's going to work or not. And that's why I say that it really should be flexible and ready to change based on what's performing or not. If something isn't looking too great and you find that it's spending a lot of your budget, don't waste your time on trying to fix it when you could just rather exclude it from the budget and move on. If you don't have that kind of time, ideally, obviously if something's not working, you'd be looking at another option or another way around it. Rather don't spend time fixing it, but just try a different method. So marketing is all about that. Always just try to focus on what does work rather than trying to fix what is never going to be fixed and it's just simply broken. Every business is very different and specific. So one thing that works for business is not going to work for every other. There's no copy and paste methodology. And improving on it, that's what we need to focus on. Work on something and find a way in order to get it running, and obviously just improve it as it progresses. But in a campaign's case, if it's not working, then do something else. Move your budget to something that is working, because then it obviously might better your overall growth in general, which is obviously going to help your overall trajectory. So here I've allocated the bulk of the budget to Facebook, to the males and females, based on education and their job. Firstly, because they're quite a qualified audience already, just by the targeting. And secondly, they are new users, because I would be excluding existing site visitors from this targeting. And so anyone who doesn't convert from this audience would essentially fall into my marketing strategy. So they would get into all the site visitors, or go into all the site visitors, excluding converters or all viewers of Get a Quote page. In this example, I've allocated a smaller amount to all site visitors, excluding converters, just because it's a bit of a broad list still. and then a slightly higher budget to all the people who have already viewed a free trial page, because these are people who go to the point where they were interested, or got to the point where they were interested enough to want to get a quote perhaps, but then just didn't for their own personal reason. So we need to obviously keep those people and get them to obviously act and submit the lead accordingly. All post engages, again, it's a good target, but because we're not entirely sure how it will perform, I don't want to put too much of the budget towards that. So just 600 for now should be okay. And you can see that at the end of this paid social media marketing information, I've got estimated leads, and that's really just the budget divided by the target of $25. And obviously this would just be the amount of leads you'd expect or need in order to see something from these targets. Do what you need to do in order to make things succeed. And at the end here we have PPC. So the chosen channels here are Google search, and these are the chosen to the quality of the leads. Alright, that's how we have chosen them in the first place. In this example, though, there was no mention of high quality leads, it was just leads, hence choosing Facebook and spending more money on Facebook as opposed to Google ads. If there was no quality aspect to it, then I would re-look at quite differently, to be honest. But in this example more specifically, I would dedicate $1,200 to Google search, which would give me around 40 leads. Obviously, if things performed a little bit better, I would allocate a bit more of the budget. But to counteract the high cost of Google search, I've put in Google display as a channel here. However, it would just be used to retarget the people who visited the site but didn't convert due to the lower budget of $600 over 3 months. And the estimated amount of leads would then be around 20. So just to close off here before we move on, I've used all the previous information that we went through to populate the sheet. We have the channels from the existing channels that were available in this example, and the targeting is based on the target markets and the buyer personas more specifically, as well as the remarketing list from the site, because it's already established business, right? So we need to include it. The objectives and KPIs are directly from the goal setting that we did, and the dates were also included in the goals. We determined the budget, and although it might not be what you want to read through right now, since it is an old ad copy, I would argue that this is maybe one of the best ad copies that Laura has ever put together, to be honest, because it's created with the pain points of the target market in mind, and copywriting formulas we already spoke about in previous lessons. This is certainly going to help you and give you a much clearer perspective on how you can start putting something together for yourself that's really going to help paint a picture of what the path ahead looks like, and how you can start thinking about what your budget needs to be doing for your business, because that's what a budget's there for. It's obviously not only there to show you what you can spend and how aggressive you can be in your ad campaigning, but it also shows you some sort of direction and how your business can easily expand using the right channels. So definitely rewatch this lesson, go through this table as many times as you possibly can, and obviously determine for yourself how well it can work within your own business. It doesn't matter how much capital you have to start with. Even if it's $100, start off with $100 and then obviously build it up from there. But make sure that you segment and dictate what your preference is with the different channels that you're going to be using from the start. So the moment your business starts scaling and building, so will the approach of obviously managing that budget that goes into the ad campaign. So you might not decide to do some sort of crazy spreadsheet like the one we just went over, and you might just want to stick to some sort of content plan, or you might have both. For example, your content plan or the content creation around that should be based on your personas and your objectives at the end of the day. And generally this would be for your organic content. And remember that you should obviously determine how often and obviously at what time you will post, because that has a very specific part to play. All depending on obviously when your audience is active, and that's the bulk of your audience that you can obviously get metrics on. As you know, this is something that you can easily find within platform analytics. Okay, here we have a simple content calendar, which is literally a simple Excel spreadsheet of a monthly calendar. It's quite helpful to create a color key, obviously, to keep track of all the topics that you'll be posting about. But here you can either have a calendar like this for each channel or for channels combined. Now, if you want to have it for all channels, then I just recommend the color key that you can create for all channels rather than just for the topics of the type of content that you'll be posting about, because then it can get quite messy over time. But this is a nice way for you to just obviously visually see how to operate and just keep track of what you should be doing, and obviously how often you should be doing it too. Now, moving on to the last part of this lesson, analyzing our results. Your work will absolutely be rendered useless if you're not able to actually analyze those results. You need to be asking yourself, what does good performance actually look like? Use your KPIs to really just determine that performance and which metrics you need in order to pull from your reports. Segment the results by targeting your audience, and use Google Analytics. Don't be shy to do that. That's what it's there for. This is a fantastic place to start. It really is. And in-platform analytic tools will really help shape your business in this new world that we're actually maturing into as businesses. But just some of the questions that you should be asking yourself is, which channel performed best overall? Which channel didn't perform? And why didn't it perform? Which audience performed the best? And obviously, what were the most expensive keywords? What gave the highest conversion rates as well as the lowest? And did the device performance differ? And what were the reasons that actually happened? And finally, which ad copy or creative actually saw the highest CTR engagement? Now that's very important to understand, and if we can ask ourselves questions continuously, then we'll certainly be able to redefine our approach and obviously fix what needs to be fixed, and obviously help shine what's working best for our business. If we can really just continually upgrade and develop and restructure our approach to doing things correctly, then we'll certainly be able to adapt with the times a lot quicker, a lot more effectively and efficiently, and obviously see a lot better results through our marketing efforts. Now that we've been through all of this information, it's time to actually create your own strategy. I urge you just to create a dummy version for a business, even if you don't actually have a business to work on behalf of just yet. Right, congratulations on completing Module 1. I'm really proud of you at getting this far already. Now we already have completed 8 lessons through one module. We have another 3 modules to get through before we can become the pros that we ought to become in this industry. All right, I'm looking forward to guiding you through all the other modules that lie ahead of us, but until we get there, take care of yourselves, revise as much as you can, and study hard. But until we chat again, take care.